They don't want me, the rich people on Nantucket do not want me to gain any credibility because the rich people on Nantucket were behind the DNA switch to get me put away. They were sick of dealing with me with the pond thing. That got, if you want to read about that, that's in Yankee Magazine. There's a little article here in National Fisherman that I don't quote as much as the Yankee article, but this is July 1991. Ken Kelly, who was right in the middle of the issue, did an article. So I said, yeah, sure, go ahead. But he knew what he was doing, but he didn't want to get into the civil disobedience versus test case issue that I was mentioning to him. Look, Ken, this is Ken Kelly, the marine biologist, the shellfish biologist for Nantucket. And he didn't like this any more than the Division of Marine Fisheries, Massachusetts. It was driving them crazy. And they pretty smart people there, right? With marine issues, saltwater issues. But the DEQE got in with all these left-wing knuckleheads. And their deal was that it was like some kind of a bad thing to tamper with Mother Nature. They didn't tampering with Mother Nature. Don't do that, Like, don't dig any ditches. Don't maintain the Herring River in Wellfleet. The same crowd is responsible up there. And I was looking at the Herring River. It's choked to death. They're choking it to death. They spend more money on the pencil pushers and studiers in Wellfleet. And maybe it's good because we can point to that and say, no, we don't want this. We want some people with common sense that know enough to do some maintenance dredging, maintenance of waterways and ditches, et cetera, water control systems. Bear in mind, we don't have the beaver here on Cape Cod, but I was told we did have beavers here. So a dam would not be actually out of the question, and some dikes and dams, et cetera. You got to use your head. Have some common sense. We don't require that. I do, but we don't. I'm not with you all when these people come to Orleans or Chatham and they say, no, you can't do nothing, you can't dredge, and they're all like, like same on Nantucket. It was like, we couldn't open these ponds. And the reason for all this mess is that we have Republicans in Massachusetts who are doing the bidding of the rich. And they, in order to do the bidding of the rich, you have to put a platform where the rich people get to pass out favors to the extremes on the left and some of the extremes on the right, although I don't know what those would be in Massachusetts. Maybe by slapping down Scott Lively. That's a concession to the, I don't know whose idea that was, but I'm going to be complaining about that vociferously in the future. And we got to fight against this money in politics. And it just breeds these puppets, Democrats, Republican puppets. So we can't do that. So my work is very, very good. And me and Fred were working together on this project. And then for some reason, all of a sudden, everyone got chased off of Fish Folk. And they all ran and scattered. And then it disintegrated. I think I'm still on the listserv, but there may be 5 people on it. But the archives there are very valuable. That what they do is demonstrate that I am a policy wonk and not the crazy guy that you can just get rid of at Taunton State Hospital because you don't agree with basically sound policy and the traditional ways of government, the two-party system. You want to have the rich run the show downtown, whether it's Nantucket or Harwich or Hyannis, Barnstable. If you want the rich people running the show downtown, then this is what you get. No codfish for you. No codfish. They're gone. You're stupid. If you went along with these people, and Cape Cod Times went along with them, and you went along with the Cape Cod Times. That's what I call the cheese food. The cheese food. Now, this is the book that I wrote back in 1995, and I did a show on that. I'm not going to get into it now, but I do good work, okay? This is not the cheese food. This is not mush. This is the market quota system. First edition. It's about fisheries management. This was on the table. It was properly on the table on Nantucket. I even had a town meeting article. That's why the SHAB board, Shellfish and Harbor Advisory Board, the first meeting when I was elected to that board, they wanted to oust me. This is why. And this and the little pond fight, too. Maybe other things. Maybe the fact that when I was a little kid, when the rich people pointed and said, "Get off our beach," and I was with another kid, I said, "We have a right to be on the beach. I know the law. This is not their property, and they can't say, 'Get off my beach.'" We were down below the high tide mark. So the other kid may have been saying, "Okay, we got to get out of here. Here's the rich people coming to say, 'Get off the beach.'" These are the West. This is the West people down Neil Road. They were notorious for doing that. They wanted to keep that section totally secure and private. And we used to like to go in there and walk to the Saquatucket Jetty, or before that, walk across Andrews River and into Witchmere. We could walk all the way around Witchmere in those days. But the waterfront is getting tied up. And so that might be one of the indicators. And my dad was not famous with these people because he did things they didn't like. Like there was a point of land, and I mentioned this to people in Harwich, and they have no comment to make. Saquatucket Channel, the point, 2 lots, $30,000 each lot. Dad, he probably talked with the landowners, and he put an article to buy these 2 parcels for $30,000 each. They're worth millions now. But at town meeting, and I can remember James Marceline saying, "Do we really need this?" You know. So both parties, I think, are in cahoots with one another. And they got the votes to overturn this good article that my dad put on the table, but the rich people, I'm sure, didn't appreciate inroads into their territory. So I think that may be a seed of unpopularity here. I would surmise that to be true. Because on Nantucket, Harwich, they stole property. They stole every public access on Hulbert Ave. They stole it, basically. And who can oppose them? The rich. That's in both parties. And they've got a good chunk out of both parties. And I do run the camera for Talking Together. And my friends on that show, that's the liberal persuasion, Talking Together. I love those guys. But I would say that all they can do is throw up their hands because, Joe Biden, and if it weren't Joe Biden, it was before that Hillary Clinton. These are the people that step and fetch it for the rich. The rich are their masters in every sense of the word. They're like step and fetch it Democrats. I'd include Biden, and I would include Hillary Clinton and all the likes of that crowd in the Democrat Party. In my party, I would include the Bushes, the step and fetch it Bushes and Clintons. I call it the Bush-Clinton oligarchy machine. BOM. It's typical American patronage is what it is, but it's on a grand scale. It's on an international scale even, I would say. But it's not really one of my areas. I'm a fishery guy. This is what I do. This is the market quota system, Bay scallop market quota system, the bay scallops. Will Nantucket take a leadership position? No, the answer to that is it's too late now. It's maybe almost too late that Nantucket would take a leadership position. They had me. They got rid of me off Nantucket because of the rich people. Who should take a leadership position? I said Nantucket should. Why? Because Mother Nature said so. Nantucket was blessed with the grounds and the isolation, more importantly. If Nantucket grounds were tied into Connecticut or anywhere close to the Peconic Bay, or even in Rhode Island and Narragansett Bay, or even on the Cape maybe, I'm not sure about that. Cape Cod is somewhat isolated too. The reason Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard have been doing so well is because they were not as connected into all the migration of the predators, things like that make a difference. Nantucket, now you're in trouble. Bay scallops are going away. Well, I had an article from Market Quota System on the floor for Nantucket. This was years ago. And people didn't appreciate it. You know, they wouldn't talk about it, but their attitude was bad. It was like, we don't appreciate this, you know. That's a bad attitude if you can't discuss legitimate issues. So I think the sea farm system is legitimate because it's simply agricultural norms and economies that work for the public good as far as our fisheries and public aquaculture are concerned. I'll just take a piece of this bay scallop ditty here. This is 1995, but I was into this before that. So it says here, plant and cultivate eelgrass, sow scallop seed. But that's number one, plant and cultivate the eelgrass. The question that doesn't get asked doesn't get answered. The question is, how can and do we reinvest back into the fishery? In this case, the bay scallop fishery. If one person is asking that question and trying to find an answer, then that question is almost a non-existent thing. What is called for here is a legitimate discussion of the question issue by politically neutral citizens. When citizens of a town defer the question of reinvestment to commercial fishermen, they hurt themselves, the environment, and the fishermen. My experience with discussions of this sort with most commercial bay scallop fishermen brings on a very bitter, negative response. So, Nantucket, where are we now? Oh, by the way, I had an article for Ahead of the Harbor Pipeline that I put in there, an article for the Market Quota System of Fishery Management, and an article for eelgrass. It was like $500 or something like this, ridiculously short money. For an industry like this, ridiculously short money. And it was like, I'm not on the list, kind of, you know. You're like, we don't do the Steve Scannell idea thing on Nantucket. We're not, you know, you don't find favor here. So, okay, now where are you, Nantucket? Where are you now? You know, we may be able to pull it out, but it's going to take a little bit more than the people that you've got on Nantucket to do it. It's going to take me, it's going to take Rick Carney, it's going to take some of the brains on the East Coast to say to the fishermen, and this goes for the codfish and the fly, everything. You're going to have to say to the fishermen, you had your day, you got your permits, now we have to buy your permits out, but you're done. You're toast. This is what you did. You can't be forgiven for doing that by us giving you more credibility than you should have. A lot of the people here with the credibility that got voted onto the SHAB board, like I said, the first thing they wanted to do is oust me when I finally did get on the board. They couldn't take it because I put ideas on the table. The Nantucket Fishermen's Association hasn't met in years. The general public should force the issue. Where would we go? Where would we be now if we had started on a reinvestment plan 10 years ago? Right. And this is 95, so I'm talking 85. And I had this sea farm system on the table. I don't know officially when, but I was talking about it for many, many years. And it was always about, what do the fishermen want to do? You know, what do the fishermen want to do? How stupid is that? So that's the championship question. How stupid are we on Cape Cod? Where's the Cape Cod Times over there? So they were behind this stuff. But they're the rich people, And the rich people have their ways. Like a pack of dogs will have its way and get their way. So do the rich, and so do the fishermen. They're like a couple of packs of dogs. Okay. So with the Fishermen's Association, I was secretary of that. I was very into it. And that got ruined, that whole thing. And I wanted to do all kinds of things with that, but the fishermen themselves boycotted their own Fishermen's Association on Nantucket. You don't believe that? It's true. And you don't believe that the rich people put the kibosh on our budding Nantucket Marine Laboratory? They did. I'm telling you the truth. As they say, truth is stranger than fiction. We had people that were like crazy on the SHAB board. Educated, yes. Crazy? Definitely. That got into things like oysters versus scallops. And at the Marine Laboratory, we were saying we're going to do oysters and scallops. The oysters are easy. It'll help carry the scallops, and we'll get good at scallops because we know we're a scallop town. Nantucket always had just a few oysters. The main oysters Nantucket had was Sacajah Pond, and those oysters were shipped out by the barrel in large quantity years and years ago as seed oysters by the barrel from Sacajah Pond because it was Mother Nature's finest hatchery. About 275 acres or so of a hatchery, salt pond. And also that pond was also known for the white perch. We could have repopulated, which was my idea, repopulate the whole East Coast with the white perch from Sacajah Pond. And I was a pond seiner, just as in a little aside. Pond seining on Nantucket was against the law. Seining was against the law at that time, but we had the upper hand on those laws because Nantucket had the native rights. So when I talk about the native rights, this issue was batted back and forth, and it was very much alive and well around the time of my birth. And there was a huge case in 1954 that set the state back. And that was the Stojack and Cabral case. And then there was other things going on with that case. But the long and the short of it is because Nantucket was a part of New York and then came in with Massachusetts later. Okay, what that did legally was it set Nantucket up and the vineyard for private ownership, which is called proprietorship rights of these ponds on the vineyard and on Nantucket. Now that was, you might say you don't believe that. Well, that was true, but it was hard to believe. And I kind of took it with a grain of salt, and I looked over at Charlie Sales at one of these Fishermen's Association meetings. I said, okay, Charlie, I'll take that with a grain of salt. He just shut his mouth. And then he came and he presented that little article that was written in the Inquirer and Mirror describing this case in detail that happened in 1954, and my jaw dropped to the ground. I said, oh my God, it doesn't get any richer That's rich American history, Nantucket style. So the rich people come in, they want to get rid of all these Nantucketers. They did their best. They really did. Because they didn't like being in a place where they weren't in control. So this was all happening as I got to Nantucket, and there was all these people hating on Bernie Grossman. I couldn't see it. Later on, I kind of got it, because he was big with Mike Dukakis, and they were personal friends. And this is all the liberal rich people from Boston that want to take over Nantucket. Period. That's it. And they did that, and I think it's reprehensible that they had to really, really hurt Nantucket by going after the native rights, which should have gone to trial in a test case. And I never was with Thoreau with the civil disobedience. I shouldn't say never, but my civil disobedience genes are just not there. But I do have go to court in my genes and settle it the right way. Settle things the right way. Way back then, and we've been into this back and forth, I said to the Nantucket selectmen, order the ponds open, and they did. And they asked for volunteer help. And so the next day I was there with my shovel, and let's see, I can't think of his name, but there were some good pond opening people there, good Nantucketers with the heavy equipment to open the pond, and the state police was there, and they said, private property. They're really, that was nasty, that we couldn't have this issue resolved properly. So the state police said, private property. Well, it was basically, for all intents and purposes, a very public area and beach where the cut was. So I got arrested there for 2 scoops of sand, started this fight between me and the powers that be. You might want to call that. The rich people were behind all this. And then they got behind the DNA switch to kill me and get me out of the way. So if you really want to set these rich people back a couple of notches, then we need to do the DNA test. And that is just a paternity test. It's very simple and easy. There's a lot more behind this that I need to tell, and I will. I will tell all when this DNA switch is revealed. I'll put it all on the table, and there's a lot of incrimination. A lot of it gets into murder, too. After I got out of Taunton State Hospital, I turned people in for the murder of a man named Jimmy John Capricorn. He was a Yarmouth man. And that whole thing is a can of worms. But that's why the FBI sided with the state police against me, because I think they have mafia connections. Mafia meaning the Winter Hill Gang, Whitey Bulger, the regular mafia. I really don't know a lot about this, but I know that the police have gone south. Okay. So, it's good that it all happened, except I can't say it's good that some of my family got murdered to cover up for the DNA switch. But maybe it is good because, my work has a lot of value. And that is, I did solve the energy crisis. I had this fishery stuff solved years ago, many years ago. And that gave me the confidence to go into the system, the psych system, and say, if I go into this system, I'm going to get that handled. I already handled the fishery thing. I did that. I was looking for another challenge. I didn't really want to go into the psych system. But once I got out of Taunton, I was working full-time as a truck driver, working at a boatyard full-time, 70 hours a week. I was a hard worker. Driving the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority buses, work. right out of Taunton State Hospital. Then they keep piling on with all these diagnoses. They're running scared because of the DNA switch. If they get caught for that, their house of cards collapses. That's what I want to see. I want to see the rich people dethroned out of our government. And there are many good ways of doing that. But number one, the DNA. Number two, give me this DNA test. It's just a paternity test. Mother, father, son, daughter. And there's a stupid judge, Ordonez, who said to one of the people, the principals in this case, do you want the DNA test to be done? And she said no. That should have triggered the judge to say, well, then we're going to do it. Okay? I mean, talk about stupid. This is the stupidest judge you've ever heard about. She's notoriously stupid. Or was. I don't know if she's still on the bench. I have really ticked off a few judges. But it's not my fault that I work for God. Blame it on the nuns. How do you invest in the bay scallop fishery? Answer. Plant and cultivate eelgrass, sow scallop seed, catch predators such as crabs, bring back the scup, sea bass, and the good water quality. Control harvesting. Oh boy, I could get into this for hours. We need some serious R&D. We mostly need a good public-minded attitude to make things happen that did not exist on Nantucket when I was out there. And like I said, they kicked me off the island. It's all good if my work comes to fruition at all. You know, some of my work, not all of it. As I say, I work on a ratio. Maybe 1 in 30 ideas is good. That's the general lay of the land on that. One good pilot project for the market quota system would be the bay scallop fishery. If a regular investment is made primarily into the scallop habitat, which is eelgrass, the fishery will grow. The market quota system provides the investment money. Assuming a good potential for growth, the investment will have a snowball effect. The idea was proposed on Nantucket, but due to the lack of interest in the concept of reinvestment, the idea never gelled, and of course, I am lazy. I wrote that. I was considered anything but lazy on Nantucket. I worked 2 or 3 jobs. So, and this stuff here that I do is hard work, believe me. This green grid, I call it now, the green grid transit system, that's really hard work. But I keep at it, and it's getting better and better and better. And these lefty-loosey people, they say, well, we don't like him. Well, what do you think the right wing on Cape Cod thinks of me? Not much. And what do you think the lefty-loosey crowd on Cape Cod thinks of me? Not much. So is that good? I think it is. These are the fringe elements that I don't get along with. I think there comes a point in time when the rich take over the world and there's nothing we can do about it. They own all the militaries of the world. So I'm worried about the rich people, big time, taking over and getting into the partnerships they have. So, I guess that'll wrap it up for today. Thanks very much for watching the Scannell Agenda.